Good afternoon. You're very welcome to the business show. And as always, I've got lots of interesting people to chat to. I'm going to be speaking to my first special guest, Steve Curran, in just a few minutes' time. Good afternoon. I'm really pleased to say that our featured business, who's been interviewed this afternoon, is Steve Curran. Now, Steve, his business is called Accelerated Education, AE Publications. And I've got him on the telephone. Are you there, Steve?
Yes, I am.
Well done. Sometimes we have a little bit of problem with the technology, but I'm so glad to hear that you're there. So AE Publications, Accelerated Education. I mean, this is something different. You were a teacher going back a little while. Just tell us about what your experience was like there.
Excuse me. Yes, I was teaching full-time in schools for around about 9 years, and then I moved part-time for another 6 or 7 years. State secondary schools, 4 actually, and also worked in primary education as well. So I've been really right across the board in terms of the state system.
And when you were there, yes, you did a very good job, but you felt that you could do better. You went into tutoring.
Well, tuition sort of began as a sideline for me back in the 90s. I suppose initially I was hit by the financial crisis that most people were back then. We've got another one now, but as a teacher, I was doing some private lessons as well, and I discovered I suppose I was quite good at it really, and it just seemed to take off. And before I knew it, I had 25 students a week. So there was really no alternative but to make a choice between becoming a part-time state teacher and continuing tuition or stopping it, really. And I decided that I would take that move and do both. And in the end, of course, the tuition grew so much that there wasn't really any option. I had to stop teaching in schools.
You just couldn't do 2 jobs at the one time?
I couldn't do 2 jobs at the same time, no.
Now, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that, one of the things that you really kind of specialise in is helping children to prepare for those all-important 11 pluses that used to be called exams.
Yes, we tend to focus quite a lot on that. We do, I believe that what we do helps children prepare for life and through improving their educational standards, whatever the outcome of particular tests. However, we do take in children from around about 8 years old when we tutor them, and they leave us normally at around about 11, although we do have some children that stay to us until they're 14. And, we prepare a lot of kids for these tests, so we have a lot of experience in doing that, and our books that we publish do aid children in preparing for these tests.
So it sounds like that perhaps is the secret. I think quite often when children get to age 10, their parents are thinking, oh, we ought to start preparing them, whereas you actually do that from a much earlier age.
So, some parents bring their children around about 9 years old, and we have them for a year through to, we really sit the 11 plus when they're 10 actually. Most of them are still only 10 years old, or only just 11. But we have, over the years, started to take children in earlier because we found that there was a demand for parents to get their children to a much higher level. One has to put this in context, really, because the state system's not really aiming at that. It has a much sort of longer-term goal of children to succeed by the time they're 16, really, when they're doing their GCSEs. But the grammar schools are really looking for a much higher performance much earlier than that. So we have to accelerate their progress, hence our name, Accelerated Education. That's what we specialise in doing, really, trying to get the children to a much higher level, much earlier.
We're just going to have a short break because there are 4 grammar schools in Dorset, and each has got a slightly different focus. So we'll come back and chat a bit more about that just in a second.
Yes.
Well, if you're listening in and you've got children that are coming up to sitting the 11 plus exam for the grammar schools, you should not be shaken either, because we have got help at hand, and I'm very pleased to say that my special guest this afternoon is Steve Curran from Accelerated Education, AE Publications, and he's here to help you with all these difficult, traumatic... Is that what you would say, Steve? For some people it can be quite a challenge. There's 4 grammar schools in Dorset, and they're all different. Can you just explain to us about that?
Yeah, I believe down in Dorset, I mean, it's not unlike some of the schools in London, but there are 4 grammar schools. I believe it's Poole, Bournemouth School, which I think is a boys' school, and Bournemouth School for girls.
Yep.
And then there's Parkstone as well. And basically these schools do a mix of 4 types of exam, either English, maths, verbal reasoning and non-verbal reasoning. And the papers are set by a company called GL Assessments. And we're very experienced to know about these people. Yeah.
So you are able to take the children through each of these stages?
Yes, I think the most difficult one, excuse me, the most difficult one is English, because English doesn't respond quickly to tuition, and it's always important to really work at your child's English from an early as early an age as possible, because English is something that's acquired over a long period of time, and it's very hard to teach techniques and quick fix things in English. So we tend to work with our children over a very long period of time to improve their English skills.
I mean, how important is spelling, Steve?
Well, there is a spelling element in the GL assessment tests. I mean, when you're doing verbal reasoning tests for them, there's some English in there, and some spelling skills are required. And there is also in the GL assessment English-style tests a spelling element. And also, I do believe that Bournemouth School and Bournemouth School for Girls do require an extended writing exercise where children have to write an essay or a story, and of course their spelling will be taken into account there as well. So spelling is important. It's not crucial, but it's important. Yeah.
I'm a bit old school when, people used to be able to spell lots of things, and here at Hope FM, we have a lot of people come in to do work experience from a broad spectrum of schools. And I have to say that when the children come in from the grammar schools, they do tend to stand out. But, Steve, even their spelling is not very good.
Yes, I think it would be easy. There is a tendency, I believe, for every age group to say that the previous age group was better at this. But that's sometimes we tend to look back at the past with rose-tinted glasses and think that there was a golden age of people being able to spell. But I can remember my own mother writing a letter to me, and she couldn't spell, and so her education wasn't that developed. But I think throughout the ages people have had difficulties in spelling, and some children are more gifted at that than others.
No, I just asked that because I was genuinely interested, because I know that it is just part of it, and if children have got that ability to express themselves and write an amazing piece of prose, is that what you would call it, or an essay, somebody like me perhaps might have stunted that creativity, because I might have been too wanting to make sure that every word was spelt correctly, whereas there's other elements to English apart from spelling.
Yes, obviously there's syntax, the structure of sentences, and your understanding of grammar. I do believe that there was, back in the 60s and early 70s, a move away from teaching in a much more structured and traditional way in schools. And there was a tendency to believe that if we expose children to language excuse me, and a lot of reading, and we gave them English experiences in the classroom, they would somehow pick this stuff up by osmosis. And I think a lot of people now are realising that it's much more important to teach the basics to children, and that's what we really focus on. And we tend to have a more traditional approach. That's not to say that some of the progressive ideas that came in back then weren't good, pupil-centered learning and these kind of things. It was great, but really you need to make sure children are on a very definite program of learning their grammar, learning their spellings, learning the meanings of words, reading very good books, and not just reading books that don't really challenge them in a literary sense. So I think there's been a move back by many people, including us, to really ensuring that children acquire these basic skills, and the grammar schools, of course, are looking for that too.
I think it's just so encouraging to know that you are providing the service that you do at Accelerated Education, because I think it can be daunting for parents. And again, just talking about the reading, I'm just amazed how little a lot of children actually do read. So having that backup there, knowing that yes, we've got to be doing this, and presumably you provide lists of suggested reading.
We do. I think we've got. I think we have blogged at some point. Our marketing person, director, Carolyn, could be more specific about this, but I think we have blogged about books that children should read, classic books, modern classics, and it's important to expose children to really good literature, and there's plenty of it, really. There's lots of good modern literature as well, but also the classics of children's literature would be important too. And I think alongside that, a program of spelling and vocabulary, and we actually provide that through our books. And we also provide creative writing books as well. There's a lot of things you can do to boost children's skills in English, and I think that's really important to do that if you're aiming for the 11 plus.
What I think, sorry, I thought...
Oh, right.
I thought Carolyn was sitting nodding her head, and I thought she was going to say something, but I don't think she was. No, that's. I mean, I'm someone who people can't believe that I'm such a busy person, and yet they say, how have you managed to fit in time to read? And I think my children picked up on that, because we've always read as a family, and I think that's another story altogether. But perhaps if a child is very bright and academic and is in a family who doesn't read, they're not going to get those suggestions made. So it's great that you've got that there for them.
Mm-hmm. I also think it's very important to make children read out loud, because sometimes you can look at a child reading a book and you think, oh, they're reading that's really good, but they may be skipping over lots of words. And you don't know that until you make them read out loud. And you think, he actually doesn't, or she doesn't, can't read that word, or doesn't know what that word means, so they just skip it because they want to get on with the story. So I think it's quite important to try and organise a little reading session for your child every day, maybe 10, 15 minutes, where they read to you. And then you're going to get much more feedback on how your child's progressing. Because you've got to remember that teachers are so busy these days that the teacher in class might only have the child read to them every fortnight, maybe never at all. But most primary school teachers will ask a child to come out and read to them. But, reading out loud in class is often not done as much these days, because teachers are often aware of not embarrassing children publicly who don't read very well.
And of course, this is where extended family can help as well. If aunts or other relations or grandparents are even round, that's something that they could do.
But the important thing is to know that your child's engaging with the text, because you don't know that when people just sit quietly and have a book in front of them. They may be just looking at the pictures. You don't know what they're doing. That's something that we say to parents. That if your child's having any difficulties in this area, get them to do it openly with you, and that can assist.
Yeah. And also, what we found, just going back to what Steve was talking about earlier with the blogs, there is a blog that we're going to be putting up in a few weeks' time about some of the books we've got in our literary list. And one of the great things about technology is that you can download the books to a Kindle or an iPad or any element of a tablet and read it from there. And we found on Amazon there's a number of old classics that they're giving away for free. So you just need to download it. Some of them, I think there's only one that we found that was about 20p, but it's practically nothing. So it's so easy to download classic books onto a Kindle or a phone or an iPod or anything, any electronic device that a child has that they can tap into at any time. So rather than them just playing games on that tablet, it's good to have something that they can read.
We're just going to have another break. Sorry, Steve. What were you going to say?
Oh, just one example. I mean, you can take all the novels of Jules Verne, which are great for boys and girls. They can read Black Beauty, and there's crossover. Children, girls can read boys' books and vice versa. But there's some books that tend to are attractive more to the girls and some more to the boys, and many of them are attractive to both. But there's many classic books that they can access. Yeah.
Let's have a break and we'll come back and we'll chat to Steve a bit more. Perhaps we'll talk about maths next time. Well, I don't have someone on the telephone this afternoon helping generations of investors make the right decision, but hopefully, Steve, you're helping generations of parents make the right decision in how to prepare their children for these all-important exams that they take before they go into the grammar schools. And we've just been chatting about there's 4 different exam subjects, and we've chatted quite a lot about English. Let's talk a little bit about maths. What's required there, Steve?
Well, I mean, first of all, I would say that all of these schools do have a maths test, and they are of the GL assessment variety. And the standard on that maths test required ranges, strangely, from level 3 right up to about level 6 in terms of SATs, which is really beyond the level that is taught in primary schools, because normally children are aiming to get level 5 in primary school, and there is a level 6 test, but very few children actually take it. Primary schools would see that children are generally successful if they've got to level 4. So what the grammar schools are requiring is a higher level, yeah.
Would you say that it's your understanding that the majority of those children who are successful have some sort of additional tuition?
Yes, I think that yes. I think most children would have had some kind of help at home, or help from a tutor, or sometimes in primary schools as well there is extra maths classes run by teachers who have children who are performing really well, and they're trying to prepare them for the level 6 paper. So it's not a picture it's a mixed picture, really, I believe. But however, it sort of cuts. Parents need to get their children to a higher level if they're going to really succeed in these 11+ exams, because what's required on that paper is an understanding of decimals, fractions, and percentages. To be really solid on that stuff is not something that most primary school children would have acquired through the primary curriculum. Now, the new curriculum, which is coming out, is tougher, and that may improve, but for the moment, I think children are probably not adequately prepared in the primary school really to sit the 11+ on its own, no.
So again, Steve, having your publications where people can go to find those at www.aepublications.co.uk, accelerated education. This is obviously helping the parents to understand as well what's expected.
Yes, I think a lot of parents, again, I go back to what I was saying about English. There was a sea change that occurred in the 1960s and 70s to a far more progressive approach to maths as well. Now, unfortunately, maths doesn't respond to progressive approaches terribly well, because maths is, in my opinion, a building block subject. You have to understand something, and then you build something else on top of that, and then something else on top of that. But if you actually have a far more sporadic and chaotic kind of approach to maths, which I'm afraid, in my opinion, a progressive approach to maths tends to have, children often don't really have a systematic understanding of decimals, fractions, and percentages. Which I would call is a core understanding for children's learning right up to GCSE. And many children go into secondary schools still without a clue about these three areas, and then they try to put it together in secondary school and fail there too. So, because obviously secondary school teachers are not in a position to babysit children. They've got to get on with the curriculum, and their expectations of children when they come up from primary schools are often dashed pretty quickly because they have to go back and teach this stuff. So, but the grammar schools, of course, require the children to have that in place. So it's important that children really grasp these areas. We focus a lot on that in our more traditional approach, in making sure children have acquired these skills. Knowing their times tables is really important as well. And primary schools have focused much more on that now, but parents need to ensure their children have learnt their times tables, and that doesn't mean going up the times table. 1 times 7 is 7, 2 times 7 is 14. It means if I say 7/8, what is it? They've got to be able to say 56 straight away.
7 8s are 56. You've got to say it still it sticks. 8 9s are 54. Write it on the bathroom door.
Yeah, well, yes.
That shocks you.
That's one way of learning it.
But I mean, there's all different ways, and it doesn't matter what way it is, but people should be learning that, because you get into an exam. I mean, you can't use a calculator for everything, can you?
You cannot use a calculator in this exam. You've got to have a very, very solid understanding of the times tables, and because it also helps your number bonding as well, adding and subtracting in your head. Knowing where the numbers are positioned up to 100 might sound very obvious to us as adults, but to a child of 8 or 9, it's not obvious. We must make assumptions about what children know, and I think, unfortunately, more progressive approaches in maths tend to believe that if a child explores and plays, and they'll get this stuff anyway, but they don't. Not always. Some of them do. The very bright children, very, very able children, I don't think it matters what you do, they'll find a way through. But most children are not geniuses, but they're competent and can learn. And, they need help. They need structured approaches to learning. And primary school children, in my opinion, respond far better to that than the vagaries that often have occurred in some kind of educational approaches, where teachers have said, well, let's explore this thing, let's see where it leads. Well, that's fine. I mean, I'm not against any of that. I do believe that maths should have that very strong explorative element and discovery element, but we've got to make sure children are completely solid on the basics. That's the basis of all great discoveries. Is a fantastic classic education. If someone's got that, they can do anything.
And I'm going to do a bit of a shameless plug on our books in terms of we've got, from a maths perspective, we've got 7 maths workbooks. And one of the differences that AE Publications has from other books on the market is that we really focus on the workbook. So we're not just testing children. We're going back to the basics of actually showing them how to work out all these maths problems and how to actually do it. And the test books just back up the workbooks. So we give them the skills, we give them their techniques, we show them how to do it, we give them the practice, and then they go into the actually test themselves on what they've done. So we always recommend that parents work with their children at home through the workbooks. Don't just give it to them and leave them on their own. And we've actually found...
We've got a very structured approach to mathematics. Each step along the way is explained. Then it's information, then the technique, then practice it, and then test it. But don't, as Carolyn has said, we don't just say here's a test, because children are discouraged by tests often. If they do really badly on a test, they don't want to do another one. That's not the way to learn. The way to learn is to get all the things in place, and then to test and to tweak with testing. Testing is about tweaking people's ability. It's not about teaching them. You don't teach through tests. You teach and then you test.
Yeah, and we've also found that parents who have actually worked with their children through all our material say that they've learned so much in the process. And we have found parents who they've kind of initially said, we don't know how to work with our children through homework because we don't understand the solutions. But working with their children, they get it just as much as their children do. So we found
Yes, I would agree with that. One of the problems is that many of the parents have been subjected to a more progressive approach in maths, and actually half the country right now couldn't pass a GCSE maths exam. That's a fact. And many parents wouldn't like to admit it, but they don't have a GCSE in maths. They failed it, and but they don't want their children to fail as well.
Is your core subject, because that's what you used to teach? Did you teach maths?
Yes, I taught maths and English. They're the two areas that
I can see you get quite excited about numbers. I don't particularly, but you obviously do.
Well, I'm actually a trained English teacher. But
right, okay.
I do maths as well, and wrote books about it. So I'm kind of a bit of an autodidact.
No, you make it sound very interesting, Steve. We are just going to have another break, and then we're going to come back and speak about non-verbal and verbal reasoning and what is the difference. Our featured business this afternoon is Steve Curran. He's from AE Publications, which stands for Accelerated Education. And we've been chatting this afternoon about how his products can help children who are preparing themselves for the 11 plus exams. There's 4 grammar schools in Dorset. They've all got a slightly different focus on the exams. And really, Steve wants to help parents have a steer to what they should be doing to prepare their children, not just saying the 6 months before, but perhaps even as much as 2 or 3 years, and he's more particularly as well for the 12 months before the child sits that exam. And we've been talking about the math side of things, the English side of things. And Steve, there's another 2 elements, and it's the non-verbal and verbal reasoning tests. Tell us about them. What's the difference between the two?
Well, verbal reasoning focuses really on partly on English skills and kind of logical processing, problem solving with words, coding. A lot of it's fairly straightforward, and it does require the children having some English skills because some basic sort of spelling questions occur, and manipulation of verbal alphabet type of things, really. And there's a little bit of maths on those tests as well, but not a great deal for the geo-assessment type style test. The non-verbal reasoning is really spatial reasoning, the ability to look at images and see the changes that might be made. I mean, really, there's only 3 things you can do with a non-verbal reasoning question, and that is, try and see what's the same, what's different, or what's the pattern. And these things are explained in our books. We have our book 1 covers all of the techniques for non-verbal reasoning, and our books in verbal reasoning do the same. But non-verbal reasoning is a more recent addition to testing intelligence or testing people's ability levels, and it tries to sort of circumvent, language skills. Whatever background the child has come from, then looking at images actually doesn't require language skills. It requires visual skills, and some people are more naturally gifted at this than others. But children can learn how to do it, and they need to take a structured approach again, familiarising themselves with the styles of questions and with the various techniques that are involved in solving them. Yeah.
I think it's all about practice as well. I mean, it's quite a while ago since my children did some of those tests. But, again, if you've had practice of doing these, when that comes up in the exam, you immediately think, it might not be the same problem, but it's something similar, and that's all very helpful.
It is. Again, I would take a similar approach. It's better to learn technique, how to do things first, and then to do intensive testing. I think what a lot of tutors appear to do is they say, okay, here's a test, and when you've done it, I'll go through it with you and show you what's wrong. I don't really go along with that approach. I tend to say, okay, let's learn the techniques. We'll do a bit of testing along the way. We have short test books for that purpose. So we do tests, but generally speaking, we focus very much on the children's learning to begin with. And then, as we approach the test, the real exam, we will intensively test and tweak the child's, where they're getting things wrong. But we wouldn't use the test as a major learning tool. Our how-to books tend to do that. We find we get much higher levels of success with children when we do it that way.
So Mrs. Bloggs has been listening in for the last 45 minutes or so, and she's thinking, yes, this is brilliant. I want to go onto that website, www.aepublications.co.uk, and make some purchases. How does that all come about? Do you buy all the books at once, or you explain to us?
Yes, you can buy our books over the internet. We're very rigorous in the way that we test our books out, because we have our own tuition centre in Slough. And we have about 1,400 children coming to us a week. And all of our books come out of rigorous testing process, which we put into place in our own tuition centre. So we tend to pre-run our books through there to check and sort out any problems where they don't work, and we can adjust them. So I think it's quite unique, because I think most publishers can't really do that. They're publishers, and that's what they do. They're not tuition businesses, which is what we are, who publish books. And we tend to publish books which only when we're happy that that book is working perfectly to our spec will it go out. So I think, we have highly developed materials. They're not half-baked, they're fully developed. So I think parents will be very satisfied. And yes, you can buy those on our website.
And we've got on our aepublications.co.uk website, we've got a bookshop on there. It's the first tab on the website. And you can go in and select the books. You either go by a look at your age, there's 3 specific ages, or you can search via the subject. And we sell the books both as individuals as well as within the set. And obviously we give a discount for any sets that are bought, rather than just buying them individually. And we've got both workbooks and test books by subject, by age on our website. And they can be purchased either via PayPal or WorldPay. So it's all very securely on the site. From the
Yes, and we're developing our range all the time. We focused mainly on our Year 5 students in the last few years, because obviously we know they're running up to the exam. We're now turning to Year 3 books and Year 4 books. So gradually that
that's building.
Compendium of books is developing. But, yes, as Carolyn has said, you can see what is age appropriate as well for your child on the website, yeah.
Steve, the time is coming up to 1 o'clock, and we are going to have to stop for the 1 o'clock news. But we can come back to you after 1 o'clock, or do you think you've said all that you really want to share this afternoon?
Yeah, I think I've said most of what I need to say, really. I think it is incredibly. I'm sympathetic with parents. It is quite stressful in preparing your child for this exam. However, I'm a great believer, and perhaps I'll end on this, that if you can sort out a child's educational level and put the basics in place by the time they're 11, you'll never really have any more problems with them. It's when they drift into secondary school with problems, it's very hard to solve it there, because secondary schools are not set up in that way. You're going from classroom to classroom, and if your basic English skills and your basic math skills are not solid, then every subject area suffers. So I think it's really good that parents focus on making sure their children have achieved those basic skills by the time they're 11. And the grammar school, preparation for grammar school, is a very good way of doing that.
Well, I think it's great just having been able to speak to you this afternoon, Steve, and reassure people listening in that there is help out there, and you're someone who really, really knows what you're talking about, because you've been a teacher and you've done that job, and as a result of that have seen where perhaps there were some gaps, and AE Publications Accelerated Education. I'm not saying it's filling the gaps, because I think you do much more than that, but it's just a backup to perhaps what people have already been taught.
Yes, absolutely, and extending and developing children, really, and we all want them to be successful. I mean, whether they go to grammar school or not, in the end, the most important thing is they've acquired the skills for life.
Well, that's it. Maybe for whatever reason they don't get into the grammar school, but by using your books, you've given them a really, really good grounding. Having said, what I was saying about my children, my children did actually not get into the grammar schools, but they still used these books. And I know that looking back, that was really good for them. So let's just give two numbers. Well, one number is 020. Perhaps this is the website address I should be giving out, yeah? www.aepublications.co.uk if you want to find out any more information. I'll just give that again. It's www.aepublications.co.uk. And is this a telephone number?
It's email, if you want to email us.
Sorry, I do apologise. If you just, marketing@aepublications.co.uk. So that's marketing@aepublications.co.uk, where you'll find out more information. Steve, it's been great having your company. We are going to have to say goodbye because we just are going up to the 1 o'clock news.